And so as we do welcome our dear friend and healer, let's call him. He does so much more as well. Bob Huttinga, certified physician's assistant and certified natural health practitioner, still makes house calls like a doctor of years past. He practices traditional medicine as well as alternative medicine with nutrition, herbs, essential oils, and clinical homeopathy. He and his wife Barb, founders of the Healing Center in Lakeview, and he writes a newspaper column, also authored 2 books, Put Your Health in Your Own Hands and A Shortcut to Success, How to Get Ahead and Create an Amazing Life. In addition, he has produced a series of mind coaching and audio CDs to help people learn to relax and use their minds to heal themselves. His passion to teach people to put their health in their own hands does continue, and it especially does tonight. He's also bringing to the world through a variety of folks the iTerra Wand with that terahertz healing technology. He'll touch on that, and a lot of us have delved into the experiences of it. Feel free to share that at the conclusion of tonight's topic as we have discussion. Welcome Bob to talk more about the healing wand and the iTerra as well as he presents tonight. Nice topic, the greatest secret in the world.
All right. This is the first time I ever gave a talk laying in bed. I'm visiting my sister and staying with her in Colorado. And this is really the only place that I have that's private. So anyway, tonight's talk, the greatest secret in the world. And that secret is we become what we think about most of the time. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this concept. I borrowed it from the great Earl Nightingale, who was one of the very successful people in the insurance business. And later, he developed Nightingale Conant Corporation along with his partner. And they sold millions and millions of self-help CDs and records and cassettes. But the important part of this process is to kind of break it down and understand how we turn a thought into a reality. So let's begin. Everything begins with an idea, a concept, just a thought. And if you think about the definition of creation, creating is bringing something into existence from nothing but thought. So often, we just start with this simple idea. And sometimes that thought is either a conscious thought, but sometimes it's an unconscious thing. And so often we create things that we're really not aware of. And so part of what I want to explain to us tonight is that we have to have more awareness in the creative process. But in order for the idea to become reality, it has to develop momentum. There has to be increased mass. And how does that occur? It occurs by the frequency with which you bring that thought into your conscious awareness and the power of that thought. And we'll talk later about how to increase the power of a thought to improve manifestation. But at some point, this critical mass develops, and that's what Barbara was talking about. When you're in the flow, at some point, this critical mass occurs, and you really don't have to do much anymore. You don't have to think about it. All you have to do is kind of keep things going in the same direction. But it is a law of nature that once this thought reaches that mass, that it must happen. A good example of that in nature is a fertilized chicken egg. You know, once that egg is brought to a certain temperature, and if that temperature is maintained, it is going to become a baby chick in 21 days. Now, you can stop that process by lowering the temperature or increasing the temperature, or doing something destructive to the egg. And sometimes we destroy our own creations. And we're going to talk tonight about why that occurs quite often. So the the big question then is, why don't we always experience outcomes of all of our desires? Why do we sometimes have some difficulty? Or why does it take a long time? I'll probably use Diane's example in a little bit, talking about the momentum and developing that critical mass. But the answer to that question is very simple. If we have conflicting information in our thinking process that doesn't match with our idea or our desire, then nothing is going to happen. So all of the thoughts that we have associated with this desire have to be complementary to each other. So it's important to understand that every time we have a desire, we also really have two thoughts. We have our desire for that outcome, and then we have the fear that we may not achieve it. And everybody that's created something, I'm sure, has experienced this. We have some clarity on the outcome that we want to have, and then we have little worries in the background that we can't make that happen. And so when Diane had this idea that she wanted to purchase this building, there were occasionally setbacks, and I'm sure she had worries and had visions that it wouldn't occur. And then she would pray more, she would put more energy into it. And then the right person came along, and that person was a direct result of the energy that she was putting into this project. And even though there were fears and worries that it may not occur, I'm sure that each time that happened, she would then develop and put more energy into the project. There's another concept that's really important about all of this, is that we actually live in two worlds. We live in the physical world of our body, where we want to manifest experiences. And then we live in the invisible spiritual world of our mind. And in that invisible world, that's where there is no time. In the physical world, we have the past, the present, and the future. And actually, all we have is the present. What we're sensing now with our physical senses is the only thing that really exists. The past exists in our memories, and the future is present only in our imaginings. So in the physical world, we just have now. But in the invisible world of our mind, we can move into the past, we can move into the future, we can focus on what's happening right now. But at that level, there really is no time. And that's an important concept when you're beginning to create an outcome. The past only exists as memories. And those memories are organized by something we call filters. Filters are experiences that we've had in the past, and all of our memories are stored looking through those filters, almost like looking through a pair of glasses. So the first filter is growing up. That has to do with our family traditions and beliefs, our parents' roles, the political climate, your school, your friends, the neighborhood that you grow up in. And then the second set of filters is religion. And many times that religion is determined by where we were born. One of my mentors was Jose Silva, who wrote developed the Silva method of mind control and stress management. And he said that he was a Catholic because he was born in Mexico. And that is very accurate. Most of us have religious beliefs or none based on where we were born and who our parents were. But eventually, every person has to develop their own set of beliefs around religion. We have to come to some age of discernment and then make a decision about whether we're going to follow our parents' beliefs or whether we're going to go on and create our own set of beliefs around religious concepts. The third filter is logic. Everything that we think about, every memory we have, has to have some sort of logic. It has to make sense. And then the fourth is gender, and we can spend a lot of time talking about this because it's a relatively hot topic politically these days. But gender really has to do with our beliefs regarding gender roles and sexuality. It's often influenced by our first sexual experiences. And then, of course, the beliefs of our parents and friends and so on. The fifth is profession. I'm trained in the medical profession, and so many of my memories and thoughts are organized by that professional filter. And lots of people who are trained in a profession develop somewhat of a sense of superiority because they know more than most people about that topic. And sometimes that can be beneficial to everyone, but it can also be detrimental if you develop a superior attitude. So it's important as a professional that you also keep all of that in perspective. And then the sixth filter has to do with race and nationality. I was born in Montana in a little Christian Reformed community, and we were taught that we were superior. This phrase was, if you're not Dutch, you're not much. And in some senses, that was good because it developed a fairly good sense of self-esteem. But then it also had its downsides because it taught us that we were way better than other people, and we were the only ones going to heaven, and my Catholic neighbors, they were going to hell. So these concepts have very detrimental impacts until we figure out that all of that's not necessarily accurate. But these filters, they have positive influences over us and negative influences. So certain things that our parents say to us or our friends and family say to us, we have to deal with them. And I've used this example before, but when I was about 5, one of our neighbor kids got kidnapped, and my mother said, "Aren't we lucky we're poor? You'll never get kidnapped." And so when you're 5 years old, it's very comforting, especially coming from this powerful person in your life. But then when you're 25 or 30 or 40 and you're trying to make a living and accumulate some wealth, every time you start to make money, that little voice goes off in your head. What about your kids getting kidnapped? And so you have to, first of all, figure those things out and then reprogram them in order for your desire and your fear to be balanced so that you can move forward with your idea. Now, some other concept that's very important is that we all suffer from 6 basic fears, and these are common fears for almost all humans. Some are more prevalent than others. First is a fear of death, and lots of times that fear comes from our exposure in that growing up filter to the religious beliefs of hellfire and eternal damnation. And of course, nobody wants to experience that. So it automatically generates a fear of death. Then there's a fear of old age. And for most of us, that fear is connected to somebody we know who has gotten quite old and maybe has to go into a nursing home and spends their days in a wheelchair and so on. So as we age, that becomes much more and more apparent that our aging is approaching and that we need to do something about that by thinking correctly. And then there's the fear of poor health. All of us in our youth had energy and good health, and we did anything we wanted to do. But now we might be experiencing an ache or a pain or joint pain here or there, or something that slows us down. And we develop fears of having more and more of those kinds of things. The next fear is fear of criticism. We all seek approval, and we want our idea and concept to be accepted. So lots of times we have a project going and we talk to somebody and they criticize us for that project, and it shoots a hole in that, takes all the wind out of your project. So it's really important that we examine that. We have to take that fear of criticism and make sure that we're on the right track with that. We all want to be accepted by our tribe, and we have genetic memories about being abandoned and so on. The next one is fear of poverty. Some of us have actually experienced poverty, and so we have fears based on our own experience. Many of our parents lived through the Great Depression, and their lives were guided by thrift and hoarding based on this fear that they might need this someday. I myself experienced a lot of that, and I have a large collection of items that I might need someday. As long as these things aren't detrimental to your project, it isn't really necessary to change them. But if they are creating negative influences on what you're trying to create, then you have to evaluate that. And then the final fear is loss of love. This fear probably comes from the ancient memories of someone stealing your spouse or your lover, or taking something from you that is very, very near and dear. And we might have also experienced personal losses, losing a soulmate by death or divorce or other factors. So these 6 fears are all things that we need to kind of look at and determine if one of those fears is an obstacle to our project. So now, if everything that I've talked about is kind of true, and we become what we think about, it would make some sense that we spend some time thinking about thinking. Humans are the only animals on the planet that can do this. Other living creatures can think, but we're the only ones that can think about our thinking. And so we are the ones that are creating our experiences. So we have to analyze those fears. We should look at our filters, see if we can find something in there that might be creating an obstacle to our manifestation. And then we have to examine our desire and see if just that examination will bring to the surface some fears, some worry, some concern. And those worries and concerns, when they come to the surface, are not always bad, because they will often guide us to, oh, we need to fix this problem, or we need to put more energy into this aspect of our manifestation. But we have to be aware of these thoughts in that invisible world of our mind, because sometimes automatic things are occurring without our conscious deliberation on that thought as a idea that we want to generate. This is actually how people can create accidents and things like that. I believe that there really are no accidental happenings. I think everything in our experience we create, and often if we look back, we can see how our thinking created that outcome. So one of the things that's really important, I just mentioned, we have to search our filters, search our fears, bring to the foreground any program, any thought, misconception, or something that's not compatible with our current desires. And then we find those, and we need to use tools that we have to fix those causes. And then our experiences will begin to change. I wrote a book called The Shortcut to Success. And in that book, there's 7 different tools that you can use to correct some of these fears and some of the inconsistencies in our filters. So why is this the greatest secret? These concepts are just not publicly taught to our children or young people. My first exposure to this, I was 28 years old, and someone gave me a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it was the first time that I realized that I could consciously think about something and could perhaps bring it into reality just by thinking about it. We were always taught that it took hard work, it took money, and it took all kinds of effort to create something. And the reality is it does take those things. But when you first create it in that invisible world of your mind, then you're automatically attracted to the people, the money, the situations that are going to allow that desire to occur. Again, there's a really good example with Diane. She kept focusing on that she was going to be in that building, and intuitively that caused her to say something or do something that brought this other person into the experience. And when that person came in, then things began to shift and move much more rapidly. What's very important in this whole process for Diane is that she continued to envision herself in that building and imagine it's Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day, and there are lots of people there enjoying that space and everything is completed. And that's, I'll talk about that a little bit more of how to put the icing on this project. So let's review it again. What's important is that the idea has to gain momentum. And how does that momentum occur? So when we have an idea, if we start to think about it quite a bit, and if we notice that there's some fears associated with that, and we deal with those obstacles, then more momentum develops. It's important to envision our desire just before going to sleep. And then what happens is the invisible part of our mind actually goes out while our conscious mind is asleep. And it finds the people, the situations, the resources that are needed to make this all happen. And then the following day, weeks, maybe later, you'll get intuitions, you'll get ideas, and you will be given the confidence to follow those ideas. I'm going to use a recent example. Barb and I, we recently were invited to see a device called the iTerracare Healing Wand. And what preceded that was about a year ago, we had a conversation about what our plans were going to be. Barb was retired from managing the healing center. I was working a couple days a week. On my days off, I was making house calls to the Amish. And although we were enjoying things, we're looking at, okay, what are we going to do as we move further into retirement? And what are, just how is this going to work? And one of the things that we said was, we really need to find the next big thing. All kinds of ideas come and go, and we're introduced to all kinds of material things, medications and concepts. And anyway, so back in April of this year, somebody sent me a little video about this thing that looked like a hair dryer. And I just blew it off as, well, this is just another one of those gimmick things. And a couple weeks later, she's persistent. She sent me another email. And in that email was a little 11-minute video that I watched. And it's like, suddenly there was a light bulb. Like if this is really accurate, this could be that next big thing. And so we took her invitation to go to a meeting up in Mount Pleasant. At that meeting, we had a chance to get more information, but also to experience this device. Well, it turns out a couple of things. I'm generally quite healthy, but I've had a little nodule in my thyroid, and some of you can maybe see what's left of that. But that thing was quite large. It actually measured about 3 inches, but it was mostly hidden under the skin of my neck, and most people didn't even know it was there. But after using that on 2 different occasions, it shrunk at least 50%, and since then it shrunk to about 10% of the original size. The other thing that I had was some scar tissue at the end of my esophagus, and it was called an esophageal stricture. And from time to time, food would get stuck. So I used this device and pointed the heat and the healing terahertz waves to the center of my abdomen, where the end of the esophagus goes into the stomach. And that was in April. Normally, about once a week or so, I would experience an incident where food would get stuck, and I would have to spend some time throwing up and spitting and sputtering, trying to get that out of there. But since April, I've not had a single episode of that. And I can tell by eating, most of the time I can't even really feel any pressure there where the food is temporarily getting blocked. So the whole idea of these 2 experiences was, my goodness, this thing has certainly been helpful to me. What about the benefit that it could be to other people? And so we decided to become members of this organization, and we bought 10 of these units. And within a week, we sold them all, and we started thinking, well, wow, the stories we're hearing from people with neuropathy, numbness and tingling in their hands and feet, getting better a relatively short period of time. People with more serious things, diabetes and the kidney problems, getting better, obviously taking a longer period of time, but having considerable improvement in some of those chronic illnesses as well. So at any rate, time has moved along. We've got quite involved in this, and it's built on what's called a multi-level marketing company, and we now have about 400 members in our group. And these people are just having quite amazing experiences. It doesn't really work for everybody and everything, but I would say that at least 90% of the people that are using this are experiencing positive outcomes. And I believe that this kind of a device, it produces what are called terahertz energy waves. This is the energy that's actually emanating from all the cells of our body. And the device is, by harmonics, bringing things back into normal function. Terahertz waves are being used now in energy. In our environment. The scanning device at the airport is a terahertz scanner, and it's not emitting terahertz waves. It's actually reading the terahertz waves that are coming off the body and off of objects that you might have on your person. There's terahertz scanners being used in dentistry, and there's also other healing devices using this energy that are being brought to market. Some of you may be familiar with med beds. This is the same kind of technology. So back to this example of how we create something. It first starts with an idea. We put energy into the idea. That leads us to recognize opportunity. It leads us to listen to our intuition and make the correct decision, and not be stuck in a place where you're saying, oh, I wish I would have. We all have that experience where we should have bought that parcel, or we should have done this, or should have done that. So when you're creating things intentionally, you rarely experience that I should have situation that most of us have had in our lives. So the whole idea here is we take this idea, we put energy into it, and I started to describe this, but to increase the momentum, you envision the outcome just before going to sleep, and you envision it as if it's already completed. So if you're, let's say you have the idea you want to buy a beach house, you don't imagine that you're going to get the money somewhere, somehow to get the beach house. What you do before you go to sleep is you imagine that you are sleeping in that beach house and that you've already been enjoying it for several months. And you imagine walking over to the window and looking out, see the lake and see your pontoon, and oh yeah, there's Steve Krychek floating on your pontoon. Bring that image into as much of reality as you can, as if it's already completed. And that little exercise puts tremendous energy into the desire, so that it becomes much more near that critical mass that's desired to bring it to reality. So anybody have any questions about any of these ideas, or about the ITER care? It's really not my intention to make this into an information about ITER care, but Mike mentioned that. So any questions?
I've got a quick question for you, Bob. When you were talking about the stomach issue, the ITER care helped with, was that a hiatal hernia?
Well, the hiatal hernia I've had since I was a child, and because of the reflux of acid into the esophagus, it created scar tissue at the end of the esophagus. So I use a little technique called the heel drop to keep my stomach down in the abdomen, because I still have that sliding hiatal hernia. But the scar tissue that was produced from all that stomach acid, heartburn, and what they call GERD, was causing the food to be blocked as I would try to swallow it. So that's different than a hiatal hernia. It's caused by a hiatal hernia.
Thank you.
Bob, are there any parts of the body that this machine can't work on?
Well, there are some precautions, and we recommend that you don't use it over any implanted devices like a pacemaker or an artificial hip. You don't want to use it over your eyes if you have had cataracts removed and have had lenses implanted. We suggest women don't use it during their menstrual cycle or during pregnancy. Shouldn't really be used on brand new fractures and brand new injuries. We need inflammation to heal. So when you cut yourself, the initial injury and the inflammation are extremely important part of that healing. And if you take away that inflammation, then it's often likely that you can slow down the healing process.
You know, they talk about the pineal gland, you know, if you activate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, what happens if you use it there?
Well, the device will penetrate into your body between 12 and 15 inches. So when you put it on your third eye, you're going to influence your pineal and hypothalamus, all of those glands. And the idea is for many people that pineal is calcified. And so I don't have any real documentation that that reduces that calcium, but that would be the idea, that it would reduce inflammation and calcification in an organ like that.
Would it hurt the brain at all?
No, we've actually seen people talk about improvements in cognitive function and thinking. It's been helpful for people with ringing in their ears and with vertigo and some of those kinds of things.
Okay.
This thing has been tested extensively in China, and they have all the documentation regarding its safety. It's marketed by a company out of Malaysia and only in the United States since the first part of 2022.
Bob, is the high heat more effective than the lower heat? We tried
Well,
ours different
the
ways.
terahertz energy is the same on all the settings, but we were just at a convention and we were told that the more heat you can generate in the tissues, the better the terahertz energy works. So it's not that the settings have more terahertz, it's just that the terahertz are complemented by the physical heat. So we recommend that if a person is a cold person, that they use the higher heat. I happen to be a warmer person, so I almost always use the lower or medium heat. And others who are more cold, they just crave the high heat that is generated.
Is it the speed of the heat, the blower? Does it make a difference as well? Because you have the low speed, high speed, and then the heat cycles.
Yeah, the heat elements are stronger at the higher speed of the fan. So there's three settings: a cool fan with terahertz but not much heat, and then a medium, and then a high heat.
But they're all equally as effective, regardless of which setting you put it on.
I think the higher heat is maybe more effective because you get more complementary effect with the terahertz when there's heat generated in the body.
What about this device with animals?
It's well accepted, and most animals actually love it. We have people that have dogs and cats, so they'll actually come and get them to do a treatment. We don't have pets, so we don't know from our own experience about that, but it's certainly beneficial.
Pet right here.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, just want a quick review. Remember that every thought has two thoughts: your desire and your fear. And in order to manifest something, you've got to always be kind of looking to make sure that that fear is not creating undue influences on your project. And then you build that momentum by the frequency of your thought and the intensity of your thought. And that intensity is improved by having images of it being already completed. And often in that picture of it being completed, I will include a sense of gratitude and show that gratitude by shaking hands with somebody who helped, or by someone congratulating me on the outcome of that project. All of those images of completion of your project greatly increase the energy that's going into that idea.
Bob, I have a question.
Yeah.
This sounds a lot like, and I know it kind of blends together, but the teachings of Neville Goddard. And I think one of his techniques is, does it help to kind of visualize your desires before meditation or during meditation? Or is it better to do it before you sleep?
Well, this definitely comes from the Neville Goddard's work, and he definitely recommended that it be done just before sleep for a couple of reasons. Just before sleep, you're in an alpha state, you're in a meditative state. You certainly can do this during meditation, but the key ingredient of what he recommended is that you have to envision it as if it's already completed. And as you get closer and closer to your project, when you wake up in the morning, you'll be surprised that it's not completed yet. And I experienced this when we were building our home above the healing center. I would envision a project completed and do it every night before sleep and every night before sleep. And one of the projects was laying tile. And I remember waking up and walking out of the bedroom and still seeing the wood floor, and kind of a sense of surprise that it wasn't already tile. But this is definitely Neville Goddard, and he's got a few good videos. If you're interested in those, I have a YouTube channel, and 3 of those are included on that channel. One was about feeling, one about your self-talk, and the other is about visualization. And we didn't talk about that kind of detail, but the most important part of that is you have to feel like it's already completed.
Thank you. That's very informative.
I'm impressed that you've read and studied Neville. Most people have not. He was quite a well-known speaker in the 40s and 50s. And then he got kind of weird. He had some people thought he had a stroke, and some of his ideas became too fantastic for people to believe, and things kind of fell apart.
I've delved into it, but I haven't read in too much detail. I'm not a disciplined reader, but I'll definitely kind of look into more detail.
Yeah, if you go to YouTube, there's all kinds of his talks have been recorded, and he had thousands of talks. So all of that is on YouTube. And I borrowed 3 of them and put them on my channel just because I believe that they're the most powerful and the most easy to put into the concepts of what Hamid Bey was teaching. He was probably teaching about the same time as Hamid Bey was. All right, everybody. Happy to see everybody around, and certainly if you have questions or anything like that, you're welcome to text me, send an email, or talk to Barb. We're quite pleased with the outcomes of what's happening with that part of our business. So have a good evening.
Thank you, Bob.
Bob.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you.
It was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Appreciate you
Thank you.
joining us tonight and sharing your words of wisdom once again. Very thankful for that.